I looked around to realize that the school had become populated when I'd been sitting there, absent-minded. Everyone was in t-shirts, some even in shorts, so the temperature couldn't be over 60. Mike was coming toward me in khaki shorts and a striped rugby shirt, waving. "Hey, Mike," I called, waving back, unable to half-hearted on a morning like this. He came to sit by me, the tidy spikes of his hair shining golden in the light, his grin stretching across his face. He was so delighted to see me, I couldn't help but feel gratified. "I never noticed before. Your hair is red in it," he commented, catching between his fingers a strand that was fluttering in the light breeze. "Only in the sun." I just became a little uncomfortable as he tucked the lock behind my ear. "Great day, isn't it?" "My kind of day," I agreed. "What did you do yesterday?" His tone was just a bit too propitiatory. "I mostly worked on my essay. I didn't add that I was finished it. No need to sound smug." He hit his forehead with the heel of his hand. "Oh yeah, that's due Thursday, right?" Wednesday, I think." "Wednesday?" He frowned. "That's not good. What are you writing yours on?" "Whether Shakespeare's treatment of the female characters is misogynistic." He stared at me like I'd just spoken in pig Latin. "I guess I'll have to get to work on that tonight," he said, deflated. "I was going to ask if you wanted to go out." "Oh." I was taken off guard. Why couldn't I ever have a pleasant conversation with Mike anymore without it getting awkward? "Well, we could go to dinner or something, and I could work on it later." He smiled at me hopefully. "Mike," I hated being put on the spot, "I don't think that would be the best idea." His face fell. "Why?" he asked, his eyes guarded. My thoughts flickered to Edward, wondering if that's where his thoughts were as well. "I think, and if you ever repeat what I'm saying right now, I will cheerfully beat you to death," I threatened. "But I think that I would hurt Jessica's feelings." He was bewildered, obviously not thinking in that direction at all. "Jessica? Really, Mike? Are you blind?" "Oh," he exhaled, clearly dazed. I took advantage of that to make my escape. "It's time for class, and I can't be late again." I gathered my books up and stuffed them in my bag. We walked in silence to Building 3, and his expression was distracted. I hoped whatever thoughts he was immersed in were leading him in the right direction. When I saw Jessica and Trigg, she was bubbling with enthusiasm. She, Angela, and Lauren were going to Port Angeles tonight to go dress shopping for the dance, and she wanted me to come too, even though I didn't need one. I was indecisive. It would be nice to get out of town with some girlfriends, but Lauren wouldn't be there. And who knew what I would be doing tonight? But that was definitely the wrong path to let my mind water down. Of course I was happy about the sunlight, but that wasn't completely responsible for the euphoric mood I was in, not even close. So I gave her a maybe, telling her I'd have to talk with Charlie first. She talked of nothing but the dance on the way to Spanish, continuing it without an interruption as class finally ended, 5 minutes late, and we were on our way to lunch. I was far too lost in my own frenzy of anticipation to notice much of what she said. I was painfully eager to see not just him but all the Cullens, to compare them with the new suspicions that plagued my mind. As I crossed the threshold of the cafeteria, I felt the first true tingle of fear slither down my spine and settle in my stomach. Would they be able to know I was thinking? And then a different feeling jolted through me again. Would Edward be waiting to sit with me again? As was my routine, I glanced first toward the Cullens' table. A shiver of panic trembled in my stomach as I realized it was empty. With dwindling hope, my eyes scoured the rest of the cafeteria, hoping to find him alone, waiting for me. The place was nearly filled. Spanish had made its slate. There was no sign of Edward or any of his family. Desolation hit me with crippling strength. I shambled along behind Jessica, not bothering to pretend to listen anymore. We were late enough that everyone was already at our table. I avoided the empty chair next to Mike in favor of one by Angela. I vaguely noticed that Mike held the chair out politely for Jessica, and that her face lit up in response. Angela asked a few quiet questions about the Macbeth paper, which I answered as naturally as I could while spiraling down in misery. She, too, invited me to go with them tonight, and I agreed now, grasping at anything to distract myself. I realized I'd been holding on to last shred of hope when I entered biology, saw his empty seat, and I felt a new wave of disappointment. The rest of the day passed slowly, dismally. In gym, we had a lecture on the rules of badminton, the next torture they had lined up for me, but at least it meant I got to sit and listen instead of stumbling around the court. The best part was the coach didn't finish, so I got another day of it tomorrow. Never mind that the day after that they would arm me with a racket before unleashing me on the rest of the class. I was glad to leave campus, so I would be free to pout and mope before I went out tonight with Jessica and company. But right after I walked in the door of Charlie's house, Jessica called to cancel our plans. I tried to be happy that Mike had answered her out to dinner. I really was relieved that he finally seemed to be catching on, but my enthusiasm sounded false in my own ears. She rescheduled our shopping trip for tomorrow night, which left me with little in the way of distractions. I had finished marinating for dinner, with a salad and bread left over from the night before, so there was nothing to do there. I spent a focused half hour on homework, but then I was through with that, too. I checked my email, reading the backlog of letters from my mother, getting snippier as they progressed to the present. I sighed and typed a quick response. Mom, sorry, I've been out. I went to the beach with some friends, and I had to write a paper. My excuses were fairly pathetic, so I gave up on that. It's sunny outside today, I know. I'm shocked, too. So I'm going to go outside and soak up as much vitamin D as I can. I love you, Bella. I decided to kill an hour with non-school related reading. I had a small collection of books that came with me to Forks, the shabbiest volume being a compilation of the works of Jane Austen. I selected that one and headed to the backyard, grabbing a ragged old quilt from the linen cupboard at the top of the stairs on my way down. Outside in Charlie's small square yard, I folded the quilt in half and laid it out on the reach of the trees. Shadows on the thick lawn that would always be slightly wet, no matter how long the sun shone. I lay on my stomach, crossing my ankles in the air, flipping through the different novels in the book, trying to decide which would occupy my mind the most thoroughly. My favorites were Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility. I'd read the first most recently, so I started into Sense and Sensibility, only to remember after I began chapter 3 that the hero of the story happened to be named Edward. Angrily, I turned to the Mansfield Park, but the hero of that piece was named Edmund. And that was just too close. Weren't there any other names available in the late 18th century? I snapped my book shut, annoyed, and rolled over onto my back. I pushed my sleeves up as high as they would go, and closed my eyes. I would think of nothing but the warmth on my skin, I told myself severely. The breeze was still light, but it blew tendrils of my hair around my face, and that tickled a bit. I pulled all my hair over my head, letting it fan out to the quilt above me, and focused again on the heat that touched my eyelids, my cheekbones, my nose, my lips, my forearms, my neck, soaked through my light shirt. The next thing I was conscious of was the sound of Charlie's cruiser coming onto the bricks of the driveway. I sat up in surprise, realizing the light was gone. Behind the trees, I had fallen asleep. I looked around, muddled, with the sudden feeling that I wasn't alone. Charlie? I asked, but I couldn't hear his door slamming in front of the house. I jumped up, foolishly edgy, gathering the now damp quilt and my book. I ran inside to get some oil heating on the stove, realizing that dinner would be late. Charlie was hanging up his gun belt and stepping out of his boots when I came in. Sorry, Dad, dinner's not ready yet. I fell asleep outside. I stifled a yawn. Don't worry about it, he said. I wanted to catch the score on the game anyway. I watched TV with Charlie after dinner, for something to do. There wasn't anything on I wanted to watch, but he knew I didn't like baseball, so we turned to some mindless sitcom that neither of us enjoyed. He seemed happy, though, to be doing something together, and it felt good, despite my depression, to make him happy. Dad, I said during a commercial, Jessica and Angela are going to look at dresses for the dance tomorrow night in Port Angeles, and they wanted me to go to help them choose. Do you mind if I go with them? Jessica Stanley? He asked. And Angela Weber, I sighed as I gave him the details. He was confused. But you're not going to the dance, right? No, Dad, but I'm helping them find dresses. You know, giving them constructive criticism. I wouldn't have to explain this to a woman. Well, okay. He seemed to realize that he was out of his depth with the girl stuff. It's a school night, though. We'll leave right after school so we can get back early. You'll be okay for dinner, right? Bells. I fed myself for 17 years before you got here, he reminded me. I don't know how you survived, I muttered, then added more clearly, I'll leave some things for cold-cut sandwiches in the fridge, okay? Right on top. It was sunny again in the morning. I awakened with renewed hope that I grimly tried to suppress. I dressed for the warm weather in a deep blue V-neck blouse, something I'd worn in the dead of winter in Phoenix. I had planned my arrival at school so that I barely had time to make it to class. With a sinking heart, I circled the full lot looking for a space, while also searching for the silver Volvo that was clearly not there. I parked in the last row and hurried to English, arriving breathless but subdued before the final bell. It was the same as yesterday. I just couldn't keep little sprouts of hope from budding in my mind, only to have them squashed painfully as I searched the lunchroom in vain and sat at my empty biology table. The poor Angel's scheme was back on again for tonight, and made all the more attractive by the fact that Lauren had other obligations. I was anxious to get out of town so I could stop glancing over at my shoulder, hoping to see him appearing out of the blue the way he always did. I vowed to myself that I would be in a good mood tonight, and not ruin Angela's or Jessica's enjoyment in the dress hunting. Maybe I could do a little clothes shopping as well. I refused to think that I might be shopping alone in Seattle this weekend. No longer interested in the earlier arrangement, Surely he wouldn't cancel without at least telling me. After school, Jessica followed me home in her old white Mercury so that I could ditch my books and truck. I brushed through my hair quickly when I was inside, feeling a slight lift of excitement as I contemplated getting out of Forks. I left a note for Charlie on the table, explaining again where to find dinner, switched my scruffy wallet from my school bag to a purse I rarely used, and ran out to join Jessica. We went into Angela's house next, and she was waiting for us. My excitement increased exponentially as we actually drove out of the town limits. Thank you for listening to Chapter 7, Nightmare. Like and subscribe for Chapter 8, Port Angeles.